How you guys doing today? Uh, Today we are going to read The Search for the Red Dragon. The Search for the Red Dragon. Now remind you, this is going to be the I read plenty of other books. Let's see. Acknowledgements. We're going to read that first. The search for the Red Dragon was easier to begin than its predecessor, 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 but was harder to finish for all the right reasons. I have been overwhelmed by the support and goodwill extended to me by the many people who have assisted me in this process and been supportive of my books. It was no small boost in publicity when Warner Brothers announced that they would be acquiring these novels for adaptation to film. My team of representatives, including Ben Smith, Craig Emanuel, and everyone at the Gotham Group, negotiated at excellent deal. And I'm very pleased that the Warner executive who brought the books, Lynn Harris, saw the potential the minute we walked into the room. Mark Rosen, David Heyman, and David Goyer helped me overcome every obstacle I saw and cleared away some I hadn't realized were there, and in the process have become my good friends. Now, when I'm reading, I can read in silence or I can read out loud, but for this video, I'm going to choose to read out loud. And then maybe another book or something else I can read inside. David Gale continues to be my ideal editor, and I've been very spoiled by the graciousness, belief, and hard work he has extended on my behalf. Alexandra Cooper, Dorothy Gribbon, and Valerie Shee have also been invaluable to my development as a writer, and I am constantly blown away by the attention to detail they brought to this book. My publisher, Peffer, is someone who exemplifies the concept of action in publishing. Rarely have I met someone who was so willing to take risks with material he believed in and make sure that it had all the support it needed to succeed. He and I have come to trust each other implicitly while having a great deal of fun in the process. Elizabeth Law, who was our associate publisher, was and is a great booster of the work I do, and I suspect is the reason our studio was offered a chance to do Lost Treasures while I was in the middle of this book. As with Ruben, her decisiveness and support is a huge factor in why I am very happy being published by Simon and Schuster. Our art director, Lizzie Broomley, continues to demonstrate a keen design sense and made the book look wonderful, and our publicity director, Paul Crichton, helped turn some who initial good buzz into a never-ending whirlwind of excitement. I am also grateful to the sales team, in particular Kelly Stidham, who has all our but become my personal advocate and helped turn hopes into stability. Our electronic links to the world via the web not be what they are without the skill and generosity of Ariana Osborne, and would be much more cluttered without the help of Lisa Manchev. Dear ladies, you have my thanks. There have been times when I needed a helping hand and reached out only to find Brett Rapier, Sean Palmer, and Cindy Larson had already extended theirs, for which I am very, very grateful. Throughout the process of working on this book, my brother, Jeremy, and our cohorts at the Coppervale studio have remained steadfast, and my family has been supportive beyond measure. Even At this ride has taken wilder turns, and my schedule has often kept me at work, home, and abroad. But I think more than anyone, I am thankful for the support given to me by my son, Nathaniel, who more than anyone inspired me to write this book in the manner that I did. It was so the prologue, right here, I'm going to read the prologue. It was not the soothing notes of a lullaby that lured the children from their beds, but it was a song, nothing less. Their parents never heard it, for the tune had not been intended for them. It was a song played for children, and when they heard it, the children came, half asleep and barefoot, still in their na- uh, na- nightshirts. The children climbed from their beds through windows that had been opened, unknowingly to let in the cool breezes of evening. They walked entranced down winding lanes that covered into a single path that none of them had ever seen before, but had always been there. It had many names, for it was only ever walked by children, and children have a fondness for naming things, but each child as they passed knew it for what it truly was. The road to paradise. They knew this because the song they heard told them so. The notes of the music seemed to emanate from all around them, played everywhere and nowhere all at once. And the music maker, when they glimpsed him in the twilight air, seemed to change shape and time with the music. His flickering, ghost like form was sometimes a grown up, and other times a child like themselves, and sometimes he seemed not to Whew. mm, uh, human at all. The music told them his name, the King of Crickets, and none of them could resist the song he played. None save for one. She had been cautioned that one day the King of Crickets would come, the King of Crickets, and that unless she was prepared, she would not be able to resist his song. No children could unless they were crippled and could not follow or were unable to hear the tune and fall under its spell. The beeswax she put into her ears, as the dream had told her to do, kept out enough of the music for her to resist its lure, but not so completely that she couldn't feel the desire nor hold back the tears that streamed into her pillow as she finally slept. Still dreaming of paradise, for some children the path ended at a great mountain face that split open to embrace them and closed as they passed through. For others it ended as a great precept which they stepped over willingly because the song told them they could fly, but for most it led them to the men of iron and the great ships that departed with the dawn. In the light of morning the path had again vanished, but it would have a new name, the Sorrow Road, as they awoke to find the beds of their sons and daughters empty. The mothers and fathers in the towns and villages would feel bewilderment, then fear and the terror. They would name the path with their cries, but it was too late, much, much too late. The children were already gone. Part 1. The Year of the Summer Count Country. Sitting in a disarray was a small girl. Chapter 1. The Angel in the Garden. John Losley dreamed, and it was even more seldom that he could recall what it dreamed about. But as of late, he had dreams every night, and he remembered them all because when he dreamed of giants, massive continents of bone and sinew, creating their own topographies as they strode across the landscapes, giving little notice to the odd creatures watching from below. The giants were so great it seemed they had both gravity and weightlessness, as if the next thundering step would suddenly launch them into space to join with the gods and titans among the constellations. Standing with the populace of his dream world, all of whom strangely seemed to be children, John watched to John watched in mute wonder as the giants strode past with geological slowness. Then, as in each of the dreams, one of the giants turned and looked down directly at John, shifting its weight. It bent and reached for him, with a hand the size of a barn as the children around him began shrieking. The train whistle was shrill in the afternoon air, startling John out of his troubled reverie. He stood and quickly scanned the crowd, departing the train that had just come in front of London. The station at Oxford was not large, but the afternoon schedules were always full of both comings and goings, and he didn't want to miss this person for whom he was waiting. He realized with a rising thrill that he was far more excited to see his old friend than he'd expect to be. They had, in point of fact, spent only a few weeks together a number of years before, but the events of those days were enough to make them closer than more colleagues. And so when a third nervous looking man with a high forehead and round spectacles finally emerged from the train into the platform, John rushed forward and greeted him like a brother. Charles, he exclaimed joyfully, I say it's terribly good to see you. I'm very pleased to see you too, John, said Charles, clapping his friend on the back. It's odd as I got closer and closer to Oxford. I kept feeling as if I was coming home, but it was because of the place, rather because I knew I was going to be seeing you and Jack. Does that sound strange to you? Yes, replied John, chuckling, but in all the right ways. Come on, let me help you with your bags. As they loaded Charles' belongings, low heat to my low heat. Charles' belongings into John's vehicle. Charles looked around nervously and leaned closer to his friend. I wanted to ask, he said, in a conspiratorial whisper, do you know, have it with you? Of course, said John, pointing to a bundle of books and papers on the rear seat. It's there in the middle, somewhere. Charles' eyes widened in shock. Here, out in the open, he exclaimed, not locked away or anything. John, are you out of your mind? He lowered his voice again. That's the Imagination Geographica, the single most valuable book on earth. Don't you think it's a bit risky? Not at all, John said with a trace of smugness. Take a look at the lecture on top of the pile. Charles adjusted his spectacles and peered more closely at the document. It says a proposal for a syllabus reform as regards the study of ancient Icelandic, and the rest appeared to be notes on course in comparative philology, philologies. He climbed into the seat next to John and gave his friend a puzzled look. Don't take this the wrong way, but how many people, even at Oxford, would care about such things? Precisely my thinking, said John as he stirred up the car. I have heard, I have hard enough time getting the undergraduates to pay any attention to Anglo-Saxon, much less Old Icelandic. What better protection for the Geographica than to bury it amongst manuscripts that no one else will care about? It had been 9 years to the day since John and Charles had met each other in London. 9 years since they had the companion that they were going to see had gone on the most extraordinary expedition of their lives. Exceptional circumstances had brought the three young men together at the scene of a murder. The dead man, John's mentor, Professor Sergetson, had been one of the caretakers of the Imaginarium Geographica. The Geographer was an atlas of maps of a place called the Archipelago of Dreams. Archipelago of Dreams, a great chain of islands that had been coexisting with our own world since time began and had influenced many of the great men and women of history. So basically, this chapter is talking about like the its history of islands and new ancient mountains and understanding the angels and um, how they work and how they're formed and all that stuff, and understanding like more like psychology, like not psychology but geography a lot, except in old nature. But not all of those influenced by the archipelago were influenced for the better. A man called the Winter King tried to use the Geographica and the knowledge found within to conquer the archipelago. Another caretaker, Bert, enlisted John and his two friends to travel into the archipelago to try to stop the Winter King. And somehow, despite terrible odds, they managed to do it. The Winter King lost and fell to his death over the edge of an endless waterfall. A new order was established in the archipelago under a new king and queen. And the Giafca now had three new caretakers: John, Charles, and the youngest of the three friends, Jack. But there had been prices paid for their victory. Allies were lost, mistakes were made, and although there had been a measure of redemption, there were some events that would never be far from their thoughts. Events in Archipelago resonate with those in our world, which was then still in the midst of World War One. John resumed his service in the military just as Jack began his. Only Charles was spared due to his general nervous nature and age. And when finally the war ended, they all resumed their lives as if the war and their adventure in the archipelago had been imaginary aberrations or dreams. And perhaps John could have convinced himself that if it all had been a dream, if it were not for the great leather bound book that he still possessed, he had not had so much as a message from Bert since the old tatterdemalion, tatterdemalion, tatterdemalion had returned them to London aboard the White Dragon, one of the great living dragon ships that were able to cross the boundary between our world and the archipelago. At least John mused there hadn't been any more murderers or another war. He didn't think the planet could survive a second war on the scale of one they'd come through, but then again, much of the responsibility for those events could be attributed to the Winter King, and he had been dealt with. John had been working in his study at Oxford when the messenger boy arrived with a note from Jack's brother. Warren that requested he come to see Jack immediately as he was reading it. The telephone rang, John picked it up, and was happily surprised to find Charles on the other end, having just received a telegram of his own. In short order, arrangements were made for Charles to travel to Oxford, where he and John could meet and then go together to see Jack. When they had parted ways in London, years earlier they had made a pact to never contact one another except in the event of a situation arising that involved the care of the Geofrica or the archipelago, or in case of another extreme emergency. It was they decided the only way to protect the secrets that had been entrusted with. It was likely, if not inevitable, that their academic pursuits would sooner or later bring them into contact with another. But otherwise, it might foster too many questions for three to be in one another's company, and in 9 years, no occasion had arisen for any of them to cross paths. So for Jack to deliberately break their pact and contact each of them directly was, John suspected, probably more for a bad reason than a good one, unlikely as it was. He hoped it was the latter. The small cottage where Jack was staying was near a cozy little village at the edge of Oxford City. Of Oxford City, they parked the car on a patch of gravel just off the road, and after checking on the Geofrica, went to the front door and knocked. The door was opened immediately by a thickest, tanned fellow in a military dress who bore more than a passing resemblance to the young man they both remembered. John and Charles both hesitated before remembering that it was Jack's brother who had summoned them there in the first place. John immediately stiffened into the formal posture he affected when addressing a fellow officer. "You are a captain, I believe?" he asked before the other waved off the question. "Please, we're all informal here," the man said, shaking John's proffered hand. I'm heading swiftly for retirement in a few more years, and plan to soon be devoting my time to assembling the family papers and as much reading as I can manage. I'm John, and this is Charles. We came as quickly as we could. A pleasure, said Charles, stepping forward to shake the man's hand. You're Warren. Call me Warnie. Jack does. I'm very grateful to both of you for coming, although I must admit it is a bit odd that he should ask for you. Why is that? Said Charles. As I understand it, Warnie explained, you've not actually become officially acquainted since he began teaching at Magdalene. In fact, before yesterday, Jack never so much as mentioned either of you at all. It was a testament of the swiftness of their self control that neither John nor Charles exchanged a glance at this. It's just that Jack is an intensely private person, Horny continued, and while he's an excellent tutor, and it is very affable with our circle of friends, it's unlike him to be so open about personal matters with strangers, so to speak, and especially so to invite them here to his private study. No offense, none taken, said Charles, trying to keep the mood light. If I'd come here for a bit of solitude, I'd want to be disturbed either. I wouldn't want to be disturbed either. This is a lovely accommodation. It's called the Killins, isn't it? Yes, it is, said Warnie, nodding after the brick buildings down the way. We've taken it for a few months so that Jack could get some work done. He went on, it's a very pleasant place, actually, and very convenient to Oxford, as you've seen. The gardens are quite large, almost a park, and extremely overgrown. But I wouldn't mind selling here for good, if we had the coin to afford the price. He regarded Charles appraisingly. You caught it to the Killins. Killins, Headington Quarry, then. I've had my opportunities for walking expeditions from the city, replied Charles. Not so much now that I'm based in London, but I do like returning here to Oxford now and again. I haven't been out this direction yet, John said, but now that I've been given the new position at the university, I expect I'll have plenty of opportunities. New professor of Anglo Saxon, Jack said, asked Warnie. John nodded. Yes, the professor and college tutors don't have too many occasions to socialize, but I imagine we'll be coming together sooner or later. How is it that you know Jack, if you don't mind me asking? So, as he just met a new professor, traveling, that's what happens. So, what I'm reading, this is for basic comprehension, basic literature to sharpen my words and vocabulary and my sentencing and comprehension. Having better explanation of words, having better explanation when talking. So, the reason why it's important to read and sharpen your mind, and like I said, I've always read. I'll read on my phone, I'll read papers, or I'll read my little small Bible book. I'll read a little bit of small things like I may box a lot. Practice knife skills, practice a lot of skills. I work out a lot. But it's one thing to sharpen your mind and read, because when you sharpen your mind and read, like just like how I'm talking now, you start to exemplify how I'm speaking, the way I'm speaking, using vocabulary and thoughtful pronunciations, thoughtful terminologies, thoughtful parables, words, things like that. Things that's communication skills, effective communication skills. That's easily to be used in relationships, whether you're trying to talk in meetings, conference calls, solving problems, being a therapist. This is why reading every day is good for you. Working out every day is good for you. Working is good for you as long as you're staying busy. You always want to stay busy and stay positive and stay away from the wrong crowd. Stay away from drugs. And if you want to question me about drugs, the only drugs that I've done was just weed, the plant. Never have or never wanted to do anything else. but I've just smoked weed and that's about it. Drank, but that's it. I'm not addicted. I'm sober, of course. That's once in a blue moon. Get my mind shaped. Discipline, consistency, and things like that. But I'm going to end it off right here on page 12 for you guys. And I'll make another video and we'll try to finish. Well, not try, but we will finish this book. Like I said, I've finished multiple books before. This is nothing new. The only thing that's new is me filming this. So, I hope you guys enjoy this video. And I'm going to go put this book right over here. And look at the kitty. Look at the babies. Subscribe to my channel. Peace.